Okay.
All right, we're recording.
Ask me something to get me started rambling on forever.
Well, unfortunately, it's nothing new. Everywhere I've already been, I'd like to explore.
So the first one, which is horizontal, it has a horizon line. As soon as you put a horizon line in anything, where there's a definitely bottom and top, people think of landscape. It doesn't even have to be blue on top and green on the bottom. It's a psychological thing because we're always walking around as humans with the horizon somewhere, even if it's obscured by buildings, we're oriented to that kind of space. And that first one is very much more subconscious than the others. Because my process is addition and subtraction, adding things, taking things away. So it has addition, subtraction, multiplication, and maybe sometimes of forms. But it always starts by dividing up the canvas in a certain way, composing, physically going from the biggest to the smallest, but then on another philosophical level, the a lot of my work now has these points. So in my mind, the little universe that's internal universe that's happening on the canvas is generated out of the points are very crucial where the point goes. So you could say that was a very Kandinsky sort of thing to do, to go from point to line to plane. They're not preconceived in a very strict way. I would say I have to do something to the blank canvas to get started, and then all the decision making along the way, the formal decision making along the way, the painting is almost telling me what to do. So that's true for me. I wouldn't judge everybody's paintings by that kind of method, because everybody has a different kind of method. So that first painting, people ask me, what is it? And I just basically tell them it's an abstract landscape, because they like the painting, but they don't know why. I have had so many people tell me that they like that painting. That's probably the most popular painting, or one of the most popular paintings I've done out of all the ones I've ever shown. But nobody can say why they like it. And the one, if you want to call it a one, or the blue rectangle, if that wasn't there, I think the thing would be very boring. It would be, it wouldn't be as alive. So, besides wanting the most intense color I can get, and kind of breaking some of the rules of abstract painting, I don't try to eliminate what people used to. If you were an abstract painter, you weren't supposed to have any photographic effects. I don't care about that. I mean, if I paint white that looks like light to people, that's okay for me. So I've sort of dumped all the traditional abstract painting theories. I don't care about it being flat. There was a whole thing where your painting wasn't serious unless it was flat. Respected, they called it respecting the two-dimensional surface. Well, I don't respect the two-dimensional surface. The other thing is, in reductive thought, you weren't supposed to use perspective. But if I feel like I need to use perspective, I'll use it. Or if you look at a lot of paintings before 1865, even though there's an overlap, there's no clear-cut historical divisions, they're mostly tonal, especially in the 19th century. Most paintings were tonal. There were earth colors. Queen Victoria at the time was wearing black. There was a kind of Victorian black and white in England, and during Lincoln's time, America had a kind of brown period. When I was a kid, everybody's porch was painted sort of like the wooden porches were painted with this kind of brown porch color, or Indian red earth color. And so people were attuned to the image being created by tonal variations. my father, see, I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, and my father was a painter, but he made his living as an illustrator for the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper. And that was before the super technology. So he would go to work every day. He would draw these ads in ink. And he had a skill, an ability. He was like a human camera. And they would actually bring these products into the art department for people to look at, if it was diamonds, or they would bring photographs of refrigerators, cars, and the artists would draw them. And somebody would do the layout. Somebody would do the lettering. They all had a specialty that they were really good at. My father actually illustrated the product, and I noticed when Andy Warhol showed up and had his factory, he used the same kind of commercial art system in his art factory. So he he started out as a commercial artist. So the evolution of American art went from sort of this admiration for European painting to the New York School. And if you notice, the New York School artists, they each had a totally, even though they were lumped together, they each had a totally different way of painting. You could, as soon as you saw their painting, you didn't even have to see the signature. What Warhol did was he brought mass production into the situation, which to me kind of changed the art world completely. Whether that's good or bad, that's another question. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm not operating in a fabrication kind of situation. I'm actually physically painting these things myself, and kind of put in the category of old school, which is very annoying to me. But that's the way things are today. It's harder to get a show. It's harder to get a serious gallery. There is sort of ageism involved. I haven't checked it out, but there's even a gallery in Chelsea now for people over 60 because they can't get shows in other kinds of galleries. So it's an old person's gallery, which I'm intrigued by. I want to get over there and see what they actually do. But but a weird thing, if you're 90, all of a sudden they'll say they can hype you as being this 90-year-old. You can get some publicity for being for living that long. But the example I'll give about the fabrication, when I worked at the Guggenheim, if you want to call them neo-dada or pop conceptual or that people who've kind of fused Duchamp and Warhol together, and that's how they operate. They would show up, the Guggenheim would give them a show because they had sold, or the gallery had sold a lot of their work to collectors, so they were already in that realm, that important realm. So if they got a show at the Guggenheim, they would come with maybe little models or sketches, and the fabrication shop would make everything. So the show was all made by a crew of people, And there are some painters, not just conceptual pop artists or whatever you want to call them. There's some painters who have a lot of assistants that are painting their paintings for them. I visited an artist like that who had 25 people painting the paintings for him. He had a painting crew. He had an archivist, and what do you? It was like a little tiny corporation, and that has turned the artist into an art director. Because I would visit my father at the Inquirer, there was an art director, and the art director would hand out the work to the people at the drawing tables. You know, here, do the layout, here, do the lettering, here, do the illustration. And if they needed some reference, there was a copy boy. It was called a copy boy. Of course, everything now is computer, but the person would go to the files. They would have all these file cabinets lined up, and say they wanted a gorilla in the ad, you know, for the cereal or something. Well, the copy boy would go find these pictures of gorillas that they could use as reference. So that mind came into the art world through Andy Warhol and people who were like his grandchildren artistically, to the point now where the artist is an art director. He's not actually making these, or she or he is not actually making these things any longer. So I'm very resistant to that, unless it's a monumental thing that an individual couldn't possibly make on their own. That whole capitalist art structure is something that I would not want to be really part of, even though I worked there. So that's fabrication. Most people go to a show and somehow they may magically think all these things were made by this one individual. They don't even realize that it's more like Walt Disney making a cartoon, you know. So, a normal painter might paint 500 or 600 paintings in his lifetime, and it's going to take 2 weeks to a month. Sometime, if it's a photorealist painting with a lot of detail, it might take that person 4 months or a half a year. He might do like 3 or 4 paintings a year. We're talking about an operation where the artist is generating out of their factory thousands of things that are going globally and ending up in all these museums. I mean, you could be out in Mongolia somewhere, and this guy's sculpture or painting of a Coke bottle could be in the Mongolian National Museum. But to get to the second painting, the red painting with green flash, a lot of my, how should I say, my images a lot of times, but not always, are evoked by something I read and imagine in my head. And these philosophers that I was reading, they were talking about kind of putting in brackets the earth before anything was alive on the earth and the earth after everything is gone. And I was thinking, you know, we're filling the atmosphere with these chemicals constantly, where you can drive just after an ice storm and the sun comes out and all of a sudden you see green clouds and purplish skies, etc. So that red painting, there's no humans in that painting. And the green flash actually happens. And I was looking at atmospheric phenomena pages on the internet where you can actually watch a little tiny video. When the sun is going down and if you're in the right landscape situation, you will see a green flash on the horizon. But in the painting, it's totally exaggerated as a kind of, it looks like a green mound. Some people think it's some kind of green moon or something like that. So, you know, basically I see nature as an abstraction. And basically I see abstract painting as an artist producing a space, creating a space on a surface, and hopefully not somebody else's space. You know, your own space, so whatever that means. So then, you know, you get into bird's eye view space, underwater space, interior space, landscape space. Because the inner space is not. I don't believe the inner space in meditation and dreams is totally disconnected from the external space. I think there's a kind of continuum. And there's a thing called hypnagogic images, you know, when just before you're falling asleep, they're not really dreams. That's a kind of space. So a lot of what I do is exploration of how can I make these kind of different spaces in paint with color. So like the green painting, I happened to be watching something on the internet or on Facebook that was a picture of an aquarium. I think it was the New York, there's an aquarium over by Coney Island or something like that. And somebody took a photograph of these fish. But somehow the light coming through the water in this photograph of these fish was green, you know. So how do you paint, not the fish, but this greenish atmosphere? So I think that's what that kind of green painting is really about. And bizarrely, I did another green painting that was motivated by the same thing, and it ended up on a internet page in a makeup museum. Somebody took my image and put it on this makeup page, and underneath were these two bottles of I think it was eye makeup or something, emerald green eye makeup. I forget the brand name. I thought that was funny. I didn't get any money for that. is funny. It's not, nothing's rational about it. Some artists, they'll have, we'll say like Saul Lewitt's early work, they'll have it figured out mathematically, and it's kind of a logical progression of what's supposed to happen. But mine is not like, mine is more trial and error. You'll see the painting, you'll think it's kind of, it's kind of minimal. Some people think they're minimalist. They're not really minimalist, because to me, a real minimal work has that logical series. But the painting is actually painted in layers, and there's paintings underneath the painting that were decided that they needed to disappear. So because another aspect of my work is that if you look at I'll skip over the Red Dawn one for a second. If you look at the yellow one with the white linear forms, and it looks like light streaming down from the left down to that idea is that, to me, forms appear and disappear. They come into existence and they go out, and then that has a totally different space. It doesn't have. It has a bottom to it, but it doesn't. You could basically turn it on its side or any direct. It's more omnidirectional. But you have to decide what's. Eventually you have to decide how, when you show it, there has to be, a bottom and a top, and then two sides. And so there's this aspect of trying to get people to have a feeling of movement, something moving in and disappearing. And when I was an art student at the Academy of Fine Arts, there was a movie theater on South Street in Philadelphia. You could go and pay $2 and watch 3 movies, and they would have Herzog and Fritz Lang. It would be what people would call art movies there. And I saw this movie called Fata Morgana. It's an early Herzog movie, and it's about not the whole movie, but portions of the movie are about what do you call Fata Morgana is optical illusions, or when if you drive down a country road and in the summer and you think there's water vapors coming off but there's no water there, mirages. I was very interested in mirages. So I kind of think of my paintings often as mirages, you know. Because as soon as you make a mark on a canvas, it starts to become an illusion. It's you can't get away. The idea of something being non-objective and totally self-referential. Well, an artist can make a whole career out of, making images from a geometry book. But people are going. The other aspect is the audience, and they're going to read into it all kinds of things that you have absolutely no control over whatsoever. I showed a drawing to someone once. I had drawn some cylinders and other shapes, and the person who looked at it was a chain smoker, and she immediately thought the cylinders were cigarettes. So I often wonder, I used to watch people at the Guggenheim when I worked there. I saw thousands of people looking at art. And I often wondered, when they stood in front of a Mondrian, what was really going through their heads, or what they thought of it, or what. And then you had people show up in the museum who would ask you if they were the real. They didn't believe that they were the real Cézannes. They thought they were copies. Or there was one guy came in who was obviously a redneck kind of guy, which I was always I always wondered what the hell he was doing there. But he looked at all the frames. He didn't look at the paintings. He wanted to see how all these antique frames were made. Came over to me and said, "These are great frames. These are..." So what you think, that was a great education to see the public, because a lot of artists never, it's like being a fly on the wall. What you think they're thinking or seeing, or what you're trying to get them to experience, is totally unpredictable. So it kind of teaches you just have to paint for yourself in a way, and then try to get it into the public for somebody to appreciate it. But what they're going to do with it has very little relationship to what you feel about it.
Do you feel that's the same for any art form? I mean, music, writing.
Well, I tried to read Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. That's I've read thousands of, I'm a book freak, so I've read thousands of books, but I still don't know what the hell that book's about. It's a literary masterpiece, but I could barely get through it, and it's one of those things that people think is great, but they actually never read. It's sort of like a status thing that's on their shelf. And I've read Gertrude Stein, who to me is beyond anything I see written today, but it's very difficult to read them. So music is this is fascinating to me, because music, especially orchestral music, or of course most people like pop songs or rock or something like that. But pure music is probably the most abstract thing you can do beyond painting. But it's more acceptable, I think, than... See, once you start getting very formal with forms and expressing yourself with color, and your subject matter really is freedom and things like space, these kind of things, I think it questions people's consensus reality more than music somehow, and I don't understand completely why, but I guess music must activate a different part of the brain than the visual, because a really great painting is going to communicate to your right to your nervous system. It's even though you're not aware of it, you know. I think in an Anglo-Saxon culture, literature is probably supreme. It's a very verbal culture. Whereas if I show my work in Europe, which you know, in Italy or France or their historical culture, I think they have a more open attitude towards visual thinking. I think in Anglo culture, take example the Book of Kells. The painting or the picture is an illustration to the text. And I think that is a very strong part of the Anglosphere's cultural attitude. So narrative kind of work goes over very well, as opposed to like a more pure visual thinking kind of situation. The funny part, someone said to me, you made this vertical painting with the blue on each side and the red in the center, but you called it Red Dawn because there wasn't the horizon line any longer, you know. But when I was painting that painting, if I remember correctly, the TV was on, and I think the movie's called Red October or something, with Sean Connery. So I was kind of watching a submarine movie. And I was hoping maybe the painting would sort of have like a more underwater feeling to it, you know. But I ended up, for some reason, I maybe I should have titled it Red October, I don't know. And the last painting, the blue painting at the end, that's to me a very underwater space, you know. And I'm hoping other people kind of feel those spaces, because space to me is an emotional thing. I tend to be claustrophobic, my personality. And yeah, I remember one time I was working in South Korea, and I was in Seoul, and my fellow teacher and a friend of mine, we went to the galleries in Seoul, and we walked into this one gallery. I don't think we were there for more than 2 minutes, and we had to get out. It wasn't the artwork. It was, I tried to analyze it afterwards. We were like feeling sick being in this space. And I think there was some sort of, I don't know if it was the air conditioning system or the heating system. There was like this low hum, and when I thought about it, the floor wasn't exactly level, and the ceiling wasn't exactly level, and we just, and it was a gallery, so everything was painted white except the floor. And the desk, it was the proportions also. There were very strange proportions. It was almost the proportions of that flat screen TV. Like a compressed box kind of thing, you know? I mean, we couldn't even look at the work on the walls. We just had to leave. There's a thing where I know paintings are supposed to be timeless, and modern artists have tried to get a feeling of time in their paintings, but to me, space and time really are not a separate thing. I would say another thing that helped change my work, because my work, I would usually get into or do something for 4 or 5 years, and it would change. Of course, there's a connection to everything, but there would be a shift, and I would say a major shift happened maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Elisa and I went out to New Mexico, and we visited her uncle, and we rented a car when we were there, and we drove to Santa Fe and Taos, but we also drove through the Navajo reservation to the Hopi reservation. And when you're driving on their road, there's no billboards, there's no stores, and you're going for miles and miles. The air is clear. You can't judge how far away the plateau is that you're going towards. So that space really affected me a lot. I think that really changed my work, that experience. And the other one, I would say, at the same time, not too much of a time factor from that, was a trip to when I showed in Italy, in Ferrara. We went up and visited Venice, Italy, and walking around where you walk through a narrow street off the canals, through the architecture there, and then all of a sudden you're in this big plaza opens up for you, that kind of feeling that you get is totally different than the grid system here, the space here. If I go downtown in Manhattan, I feel like I'm walking through a canyon, never seems to open up very much anywhere, you know. So,
Now, when I met you, your artwork was very much of the, strong lines moving and different colors. And for me, where I was then, and I've shifted too somewhat, but that was nothing but movement.
right.
And it was interesting to hear you say that this is still part of your work. The early and the current, is there like a clean break? Even is it the movement itself is there, but otherwise, like what else has come through from there?
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, those, I mean, if you were going to compare them, the ones that you saw in the 80s are like explosions, you know. But if you look at the film, the video that you helped me with on YouTube, where someone had deconstructed the shapes, you know, that's sort of like something passing by, passing through. So it's a whole different kind of movement, a whole kind of different kind of speed. And the ones in the 80s tend to like come out at you off the surface visually, where I think there isn't a consistent space in any of these. Some of them are shallow, some of them make you feel that they recede, you know. And I haven't figured out how to also, in my current work, feel like something's projecting forward. So that's something that I'm trying to work on. The little steps in between of the, because things overlap, are just experiments and trying to do something that you don't. A lot of the resistance revolves around habit forming functions and movements, and trying to get around that somehow, or forcing yourself to do something you wouldn't normally do and see what that does. You might have to throw it away, or whatever, but that's part of the whole thing. And the other thing that people don't realize is even though a lot of things are spontaneous, there's this period of time where you're spending a lot of time just looking at the thing. So if you have a day job, like I had in the past, there wasn't much time to just sit there and look at it. There was this whole psychological feeling that you have to hurry up and keep working on this, but tomorrow morning you have to go back to work. And then just, not spending enough time. Since I've retired, my work has improved a whole lot, I think. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.